Welcome to Wisdom Unlocked, The Ways of God, a production of Lion's Share, a ministry that aims to co-mission with Jesus in making disciples of all nations. We ignite and provide resources to disciple makers in the church and throughout the vocations. In our world today, there is more information available than at any time in history, but wisdom is in short supply. In this podcast, you'll hear how learning about the character and ways of God is a guide to wisdom.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sonia Bierson, and this season we're talking about Lion's Share's initiative called the Leadership Games. It took place last summer, and the goal behind it was to create an intentional path for older leaders to get trained on how to disciple younger leaders in their vocational field. It was an opportunity to meet up and learn together, and then spend the next year meeting together online to go through a discipleship resource that we have called a discipleship journey and continue building relationship. Now, one of the vocational fields represented at the Leadership Games are people who work in business, whether it be corporate, medium-sized, or small. Businesses are what makes the world go round. It's a source of work, profit, goods, services, and it powers our economy. We literally need it to live. So it's of great importance that we have godly people leading and running businesses, making money with integrity, treating employees and customers with honor, and being a positive impact on the community. Today, my guests include Matt McCauley, who is CEO and co-founder of Logo Brands, the #1 non-apparel wholesale supplier of sports gear in the country. That's the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, Major League Soccer, and the NCAA. Shout out to you March Madness fans. Matt, do I get the job of being your official spokesperson?
Of course.
Okay, I'm trying. I'm also joined by Nancy Reese, who listeners of this podcast have heard before. She has worked in both the business and not-for-profit arenas. Her career includes service as Senior VP for the YMCA of Middle Tennessee and management consultant and trainer for YMCA of the USA. She's also served as executive coach and consultant with the Human Capital Group and has mentored dozens of women, including me. And representing the younger leaders in the group is Elizabeth Regan, who is a supply chain professional currently working as an operations analyst for FedEx in the Pittsburgh area. She serves her local church as a volunteer in the young adult and hospitality ministries. Well, thank you all for joining me today. Are you excited?
Very much.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. That was sounding a little less than excited, so let's amp up the energy here. Well, thank you all for joining me today. Let's start with you, Matt. Tell me a little bit about your origin story, your faith journey.
I grew up in a Christian home. My parents got saved when I was really little. Grew up under them starting to listen to John MacArthur. So the teachings were very much, more intellectual than it was Holy Spirit geared. But so I had a lot of theological knowledge, but I didn't get saved until I got to college. Almost myself and my whole fraternity got kicked off campus for some of the things I was doing. And that was when I finally got saved. But from there, it was, a lot of quick growth because I'd had a good foundation. I knew a lot about scripture, but I just openly was not following the Lord. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And so I went down that path for 18 years, and then it quickly changed.
Matt, when you first heard of the word discipleship, what did you think that was?
I only knew my dad teaching to us every night at the dinner table. But he and I didn't have a great relationship. So that was about it. I'd never been discipled by anyone. And I was always used to going at it alone. So it was, for me, it was just kind of doing my own thing. I read a lot. I was an avid reader. So I think I got by with that. But my parents were the type that, there wasn't a church that was ever the right church, and they could always find 1,000 things wrong with it. So we bounced around and tried hundreds of churches. So we were never anywhere long enough to actually get discipled by anyone.
So when Dave approached you about being a part of the Leadership Games, what did he say? What made you decide that you wanted to be a part of it? And did you even have any idea what it was?
I mean, he ran through what it was, but I was not the guy that went to camps. I didn't go do all the conference stuff. That wasn't me. So Dave's as close to anybody that's ever discipled me outside of my dad. So when he asked, he didn't really have to share much. I just said, all right, you want me in? I'm in. So it was simple for me. Even though I would say that that's not really my area that I tend to jump in, but I kind of viewed it through the lens of our business has always been my mission field. And so I kind of was, it made sense to me. So it's one of those, okay, I'm just going to treat everybody like I've been trying to treat everybody at our business, where I'm going to share the gospel. And for those that believe, I'm going to help them to grow. So that's how I viewed it.
Nancy, tell us a little bit about your origin story.
So, like Matt, I grew up in a Christian home, but never heard the words born again, personal relationship with Jesus, got basic Bible teaching, stories, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until Bill and I had been married for 2 years, and I had a really horrible dream one night of Satan chasing my family into church and burning it down around him. And I wouldn't go to bed that night. I wouldn't just didn't want to go to sleep. And so we called a friend, and he had us come over and explain that had I been in the Word, I would know that's not the techniques of the enemy, and would we like to come back over? So that's Bill and I accepted Christ on the same night. And then they got us pretty quickly into a discipleship training program. So at a local church. So that was pretty cool.
Now, at the time that Dave first started talking about the leadership games, you were on the board of Lion Share along with me. And when he was explaining it, what stuck out to you? Where did you see the need based on your experience in the church, your experience with mentoring women? What seemed special or unique about what was happening with the leadership games?
Just knowing how young people were looking for people to mentor them, to share with them, to be able to talk over things, to be able to really discuss tough issues that they were dealing with, whether it was in the workplace or in their personal lives, and how young people I encountered were always hungry for that. And so to tie that to a vocation, to me, was huge, because not only would you get somebody that could talk to you about your personal life, but then, when the tough stuff comes up at business, or you're trying to launch a business and you want to do something, there were all kinds of possibilities with that.
Elizabeth, how did you end up at the leadership games?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dave has a really wonderful discipleship, of course, relationship with the leadership at the church that I go to here in Pittsburgh. So he has discipled some people that are on staff, and just is a person that our leadership goes to and respects a great deal. So he approached them and said, hey, I have this opportunity. And they brought together some young adults to just hear Dave talk about his vision for the leadership games. And so it was really a neat night just to understand a little bit of his vision. I think it still was, I think we had to talk a little bit more to get some of the details. I'm very tell me all the details. What's the itinerary? What are we doing? But I really loved his vision for it, and the way that he spoke about just what it was going to look like. And just the incredible opportunity to get to meet and just build relationships with leaders like, Matt and Nancy, who know what they're doing in this space and are still learning and growing, right? But have a lot of experience. And it's just so beneficial to someone in my position, just sort of starting this journey.
Before you came, what was your faith journey?
Yeah, so I was raised in a Catholic household. So I would say we served in every capacity possible at my church. But I think the actual personal relationship with the Lord and what that looked like in your daily life, what prayer looked like regularly, other than just praying over your food before you ate it, was not really something that was a part of my life. So I had a friend growing up who was really involved in her youth group. And I'd always wanted to go on some sort of service trip. And so went to West Virginia and really had a week of meeting the Lord in a really new way, right? To set time aside to pray with him, to understand what a personal relationship was like, to really pray and just be prayed over, right? That was an incredible experience that was pretty different for me. So for my faith to really become my own and to really understand in a new way what faith was.
Matt, as you and Nancy had to spend a year leading up to the leadership games going through a discipleship journey, which is Lionshare's primary discipleship resource. And from what I hear from the different groups who were doing this, that 1 year was a bit of a special time, even before the young leaders became a part of it. Would you agree with that?
I miss it. It was great. It was a really good year, and obviously this new group has been good. But yeah, it was one of the better years of discipleship with the group, and I was very surprised at how close we all got for not ever really seeing each other in person. And quite a few of us actually met for the first time at the games, which was kind of fun. To kind of give a hug to somebody you've been sitting there, sharing everything with for the past year. And it's like, yeah, we've actually never met in person. So
did it seem or feel different because everybody in that Zoom call was or had been involved in business, that was their mindset, that was their experience?
That helped to talk through certain things, but I think at the core, everybody was vulnerable. And I think that's really what brought everybody together. Nobody was holding back. And, we all came in knowing that we were there to grow, not that we were leaders that had all the answers.
So over the course of the last 7 or 8 months that you all have been meeting, I don't know exactly how you divided it up, but as you've been meeting with some of these young leaders, what has kind of bubbled up to the surface? As you go through this material, as people in business are looking at it through that lens, what's bubbling up? What light bulbs are going off?
For me personally, it's been how to be patient with teaching. But I think that inside of our group, I've seen it in a myriad of different ways throughout the different everybody came in with the area that they probably needed to work on that was very apparent. And so seeing growth in those areas right away. You've got the ones more geared like I was. They're coming in hot and heavy, and they got a lot to share, but how to share it. The others that probably have a lot to share, but they're not speaking up. So how to find their voice, and then everybody else in between. So it's been fun to see everybody come into their own a little bit and feel comfortable and grow in their walk that in a way I don't think maybe they had before.
Nancy, have there been particular parts of a discipleship journey as you go through it with these business-minded young leaders that you feel like has resonated a lot with them, or there's been a lot of follow-up or discussion related to it?
What I've found is that what they're experiencing is what I experienced when I was at their age, and how much I wish I'd had the discipleship journey and somebody to mentor me at that point. And so the ability for me to share what I've learned, whether that's an example, I send somebody a book, scripture or a quote someplace or something that really impacted my life, knowing that the impact it had on me and seeing that they're struggling with some of the same things that I did. It feels special to be able to pour into them and be there to answer questions. And we have one young woman who's launching a business actually next Saturday. Matt and I've both met with her as part of that. So,
what kind of advice did you give her?
Well, I don't know what Matt did because she met with us separately, but I was just giving her strategic views about strategic goals and critical deliverables, key performance indicators necessary with a timeline to get where she needed to get. So, yeah.
Very practical yes. Advice. How about you, Matt? Yeah. What did you tell her?
A lot of the same. And then, when she was they were struggling to find a certain, way that they wanted to go. And they were so adamant about, well, we want to go this way. And when you run the numbers and, certain things aren't hitting, I'm like, are you sure that the Lord wants you to go this particular way? Yes, you feel called to open this new business, but is it specifically in this way? So I was just trying to challenge them to think that, sometimes we come in with what we want. I know I've made that mistake plenty of times. And then start to go that route before you go, well, did I really ever consult the Lord on every aspect of this? Yes, I feel that I was called to go do it, but did I get down to the details with him about it? And so that, it was evident. So.
Yeah, in those instances, it's like, hey, let's open up our chapter to how to hear the voice of God again.
Yep.
Let's go backwards. Let's go back to that
Yeah.
chapter. Elizabeth, tell me what's been resonating with you as you've been spending the last few months with your older leaders and with a discipleship journey.
Yeah, I think there's a number of layers, right? But I think the beauty that was I think we forged a lot of relationships at the leadership games themselves. And I think just the encouragement of people who are at the same place you are and are trying to figure all of this out. And just the encouragement of what they're learning and how the Lord is speaking to them. And so it's been really neat how often the same message has resonated as we're going through certain chapters, right? Where we're talking about something in something that someone's bringing to them as a coworker, and someone else has just worked through that. I just think there's a number of ways in which the Lord is just using each and every one of us to encourage each other in our journey. So that's been really neat. And then I think just having Nancy and Chris, their wisdom and the way in which that has spoken into each of our lives and the way in which they so generously share that with us has been really impactful. So I'm just really thankful for that space and time that we have each week.
Is there a specific lesson or a specific aha moment that you can go back to and say, oh man, like I did not know that before, or this is hitting me differently because of the stage in my life or the stage in my career that I'm at?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I think it started at the games. The seed was planted. We spent some time one morning talking about relinquishing our rights. And then we went and hit that chapter again during our journey together. And so actually for me, I like brought it with me as no one can see it, but it's bad for podcasting, I'm sure. But I took a little note card of the 7 things from the list that most impacted me, right? Like it's a daily surrender of, at this point in my life, right? There are expectations about what you thought your life would look like, where you saw it going, what people around you are experiencing in their lives, right? And so for me, every day, it's a reminder I literally have it on my nightstand and look at it every morning, just like, what do I need to surrender to the Lord every day in order to serve him and others in a more meaningful way and with hands open. So that for me has really resonated because it's a reminder that everything is a gift and I'm not owed anything. I think there's just a lot of like entitlement and expectation amongst our generation for whatever reason. And so I think it's been a really good and very practical reminder that those needs are the expectations that you have aren't necessarily things that are promises from the Lord. And so setting them aside to be able to allow him to work has been really meaningful for me.
Yeah. And if any of our listeners are wondering, what is relinquishing your rights? It's the last episode of the last season. Just go back and listen to that. And you can get all the details, or you know what, just go buy a discipleship journey and there's a whole section of a chapter on it. So we won't give it all away, but yes, relinquishing our rights is a very humbling teaching. And you're right, Elizabeth, having to remind ourselves of that every day is a choice and also a real act of humility. So there's my commentary on relinquishing rights. Well, Matt, I know that when Dave came, it's a big ask, right? To say, hey, would you devote 2 years of your life to the leadership games, right? The year leading up to the event and experience itself, and then the year coming out of it. I'm sure there's people listening who are thinking, well, that seems like a big commitment, but more importantly, I don't know enough to be discipling anybody. I'm no expert. I never taught a Sunday school class. I'm not an expert on business ethics, so I really can't be a part of doing something like this. Did you ever have those doubts yourself? What would you tell somebody who came to you and said, I don't know if I can do that?
I would say if you've got scars, you're well equipped. I don't, as my wife says, I don't maybe lack some confidence in things. I don't think, I just look through the lens of the Lord made me who I am, and we're all have our strengths and weaknesses. So whatever you bring is whatever the Lord gave you. And I've made way more mistakes than most, and I've learned from them, and I can at least share what not to do. So for me, it's kind of one of those, if you've made a few mistakes along the way, then you're probably well equipped. Humility goes a long way for just being able to share. And so for me, I never thought much about it because of that. But I would say for anybody who's thinking they're not prepared, you probably are.
Yeah. And I think if you yourself have ever wished that there was somebody who had poured into you, right, you can fix that by being that person yourself. You said, Matt, yourself, you really didn't have somebody, especially in business, who was that person for you.
No, yeah. If you're willing just to be vulnerable and share share where you're at, I think that's all most people really want, is to say, okay, what would you have done? It's not even what's good. I think that's what a lot of people go, oh, well, I didn't make the best decision then. Well, you didn't have to have made the best decision at that point. You just have to know what you shouldn't have done or what could have been after you've learned it, the second go around.
So a lot of people, when they think about business, they think, oh, the Bible has a lot of things to say about money, but it's a lot of bad stuff about money. So, those might be two separate things, right? Business over here, your faith over here. When you talk to people about being someone who's a Christian who is also a businessman, what do you say about how there isn't a division between those things?
I think Satan wants to divide your life up in any possible way he can. And he'll separate any aspect of your life that you'll let him and separate it from the Lord. And the world's great at sharing what you should or shouldn't. Now, that said, I can be the first to attest when I've looked across the table to bankers and I'm like, I get why you want me to do that, but I feel like the Lord's leading me to go somewhere else. And that's an interesting conversation to have in business, but it is what it is. It's why I'm making the decision. And you're either kind of, getting on board with who I am in every aspect or not. And hopefully I'll be right enough times that I build the credibility when I scare you with some of the things I say that you'll stick with me. So I don't draw a line best I can inside of business and with my faith. And I know it, it's tough for some people, but that's just what I try and do.
Nancy, I'll never forget a story you told me about how I believe you were teaching a class at Lipscomb, and you asked people in the classroom, these are young, probably millennials at that point, you asked them if they thought that the Bible had anything to really say about business. And nobody really raised their hand. People didn't really seem like that registered at all. And why don't you pick up the story there?
They actually laughed. I mean, there was this like, you're serious, And so I just made it a challenge for them. I said, I want you guys to go just the book of Proverbs. You don't have to go to any other book. Just look in Proverbs and see how many principles for business you can come back with next week. And they were stunned. And I had one student in particular that was just so blown away that she ended up going to Liberty University and studying law because she wanted to do business law in a different way that was biblical now that she knew there were actual principles in the Bible. So it was a fun kind of encounter to have.
Yeah, I'll never forget that story because it seems so obvious to me. But I think part of the problem is that for so long in the church, people haven't talked about vocation and faith mixed together. And so I think that is something very unique about the Leadership Games, is that it is not just a spiritual conference, like you were saying, Matt, or retreat, that we're trying to look at this, especially where the younger generation spends their time, right? This is what I always tell my kids, what you have to offer as a young person is the fact that you have no mortgage, no pets, no plants, and you work for cheap, right? Like that's what you offer as a young person going to work. And so this is your time to kind of figure some of that stuff out. Nancy, when you've been talking to some of these leaders, are they bringing up scenarios to you that you think are any different from some of the scenarios you dealt with when you were coming up in business?
The cultural pieces might be a little bit different, or technology, because of the years between when I grew up or was early in business and they were. But the same principles are there. I'm in conflict with my boss. How do I honor my boss and yet disagree? Or I'm really struggling to do the right thing because I've got a boss telling me I should be cutting corners, those kinds of things. It's the same pressures we've all had. They just manifest in a little bit different way. And so it's really a question about how do we honor God and honor people while we're doing business, so that somehow we're different. Somehow when we founded our business, we made a decision, we were in executive search, that we were going to respond to every person who replied or who applied for a position. And that just, nobody did that in the industry. But that was one way of honoring people, and so they knew if they didn't get an interview, they knew they didn't get an interview. If they did get an interview, we responded back, told them how they did, what our suggestions were. And so that paid off in a lot of ways, just because then even if they didn't get the job, when they got one someplace else, they hired us to do their search work because they wanted their people treated that way, And so the same's true today. How do you honor people and do the right thing and bring glory to God all at the same time?
Elizabeth, part of the reason why Dave organized this in such a way where there's vocational fields, right? That's kind of an area he's been spending the last decade kind of thinking about discipleship. And, part of it is because certain fields, I think, face certain spiritual temptations and strongholds that maybe others, it's not as big of a deal, right? Because of what aspect of society or culture it's focused on. In your experience working, but also as you go through scripture and as you're talking to these disciplers, what's kind of bubbling up for you in terms of what are some of the spiritual strongholds that exist in business and for your generation
absolutely.
too?
Yeah, for sure. I think there is an interest in, there's this hustle mentality of I need to be the best. I don't care what I need to do to get there. I don't care what bridges I need to burn. And so I think there's just this interest in getting ahead at all costs, because there is just, everybody wants influence and power. And so I think I've seen that a lot. I've also just seen that I think people don't often want to, in conflict or in relationship with their coworkers, there is so much gossip. I know I know that's true of every generation, right? But it is, and I think the ability to just send a quick little chat to someone of oh, this person's so annoying, right? Just the number of times that I'm whoa, what are we doing? And so even sometimes having to be okay, so let's remember that this person is doing the best they can, and whatever your feelings are, let's set this is a human being, and in the same shoes, how are you feeling if 6 people that you work with are just talking about you behind your back, right? I think there's just so many little things where man, this is everywhere. So those are 2 things that I see most commonly in my workplaces. Then I just think it's really when you aren't participating in cutting people off at the knees, or you don't really want to talk about other people and just negative. I think that is kind of different, right? Where I used to work, my roommate was yeah, you just don't really want to talk about this very much. I was yeah, no, I think it's not helpful. And what is it doing, right? We're talking about someone and they don't have the ability to be a part of this. And we're not honoring them in any way. We're not respecting their dignity as a human being. And we're not thinking about what they brought with them to work that day that we have no idea, right? Their mind might be distracted because something's going on at home. They're caring for a child or a parent or loved one, right? You never know, right? And so I think, how do we do that better? How do we honor people that we're working with? I guess those are the two things that I've seen most regularly.
One thing I've been asking all of the younger leaders is, what do you tell your friends about what the leadership games is and what it was for you? I'm having a really hard time marketing this thing because everybody I talk to is like, well, I didn't really know what it was, but I just showed up, right? Somebody told me to. And I'm like, well, I don't know if that's a great marketing campaign. Just show up. That's probably not going to work. So tell me how you're explaining it, how you're describing it to other people, because you want them to go or you want them to understand the experience you had.
Yeah, I think what I've just said is it's an incredible and just really unique opportunity. It's not a conference where you go, you get filled up, and then it's just like, okay, there's no practical application for this. It's over, right? I think you learn so much while you're there. You build a community of people that you get to walk through the next year with. And I think for me, that really mattered. I don't want to do this alone, and truly I can't. And so I think building that community was beautiful. And then, I just think it's a unique opportunity to have. I mean, these leaders, like you said, right, invested a year before we even got there, right? Like the generous investment that is such a unique opportunity from leaders in business. That is not common at all, right? It's not. It's really hard locally sometimes to find those little pockets, right? Specifically vocationally. And so I think it's a really unique opportunity to learn and to grow in a way that I think we do a really good job in learning about the Bible and learning in Bible study. But I think sometimes the practical applications of that and what it looks like in your daily life and in your vocation is missing. And I think that's really the gap or the bridge that this is, or the gap that this is bridging. Can't get that in the right order, but that is what I've found about it. And that's how I've explained it. It is an incredibly practical curriculum, right? Like I think there's lots to be learned, and I think every week there's something new that applies to my life and that we talk about and that's put on my heart, right? I don't know if that is going to help you market it, but I mean, if worse comes to worse, I can just talk to Dave, because I think I think listening to him and just him talk about his vision. And also, I guess one thing that I didn't say too was I really enjoyed each night we had a specific topic in culture. And so it helped me be better equipped to talk about like really difficult things. And I loved how Dave talked about being both winsome and wise. We need to be approachable. We need to be people that are in this, and also that are like in love and truth, able to discuss what's going on in the world, right? We can't just turn a blind eye. We can't just sit on our hands and just be silent, right? We got to be in this with people. So I loved that aspect of leadership games as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it, because we've been jumping around talking about before and after, but we haven't actually talked about the leadership games itself. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Matt, that was an experience, right? Like you said, you got to meet the other leaders you'd been spending a year with, but this was an opportunity to also spend time with and learn together with the ones that you'd be moving forward with. What was impactful for being there during those, was it 3 days? I'm trying to remember. Mm-hmm. The several days that the leadership games itself was going on. What did you walk away with?
For me, probably the biggest one was actually, I find it's hard to find good material or anything that's out there that can cross all the different denominations without being watered down. And then, you find certain thing that's good, but they have their denominational slant to it, or their theological, deal that they're really honed in on. And the ADJ is just so rooted in just the scriptures, and it just covers the, what it's being said, and it doesn't get diverted into all the, theological side streets that everybody wants to talk about. And so it was really nice to sit around and you're talking with people from all different kind of walks and all different kind of backgrounds and all over the country, and getting to know people. And then you realize when it's done correctly, the church, if you will, that you look up and say, well, we have the Bible in common. And so therefore we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing, right? To feel some unity when we talk about and experience so much disunity. Yep. In the church. So I hear what you're saying. Well, Nancy, I'm going to have you have the last word here. I have always found with you that I'm the beneficiary of you asking me fantastic questions. Usually it starts with, Sonia, did you pray about that before you decided or answered that question? And it's like, Nancy, you ask me the same question every time, and I always have the wrong answer every time. So thank you for asking it. But one thing you've always expressed to me is, this is not a one-way street, that you get so much out of a discipling relationship. And it's not a cliche. Has it seemed that way with this group that you've been walking with as well?
Absolutely. It's, I'm in the season of my life where I'm pouring back into the next generations, and it brings me real joy. It's just whether they have a revelation that I'm sitting here thinking, I've heard Elizabeth say things on our Zoom calls going, oh man, I wish when I was 30, I'd known that stuff myself, And so it's just a joy to see young people who've gone deeper and are getting it more than I did at that age. And to know that in some small way, I'm a part of helping them do that. So there's a real joy and a sense of giving, serving that brings great satisfaction and peace.
Well, if you all listen to this and you aren't on board and making your way to Nashville second week of July, then you're definitely not listening, right, people? Yeah. Okay, we got lots of smiles. Well, thanks to the three of you for joining me to talk about the leadership games. And we'll be talking to, leaders in other vocational fields throughout this season. And I'm sure they'll have some of the same stories and also some very different stories from what you all have shared, because each person comes from a different place, but each vocational field is also struggling with different challenges and strongholds. So to our audience, to learn more about the leadership games and the tool that we use, go to lionshare.org. Leadership Games video is under events. And I think watch those videos. You'll be able to hear from both young leaders and old leaders about what has made this such a special experience for them. That's what Dave likes to call it, not an event, but an experience. And I think that's right. So thank you all, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Wisdom Unlocked: The Ways of God is a production of Lionshare, a ministry that ignites and provides resources to disciple makers in the church and throughout the vocations. To learn more about what we do and how we can help you, please visit lionshare.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Vimeo.